name is David Glouberman, Glou, even though it's a silent U. And I'm 78 years old, 79 next birthday. And I grew up in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, where I've lived until about halfway through my life. Then I moved here. I had two parents, like most people do. They were born in Europe, and both of them immigrated to Canada. My father from Poland around 1928, and my mother to Ottawa around 1934, I believe, or 35. My father lived in a very small town with 8 siblings near Stolin, and he moved with his brother to Montreal, where his sister had already settled. So that's why he came to Montreal. My mother lived with her 7 siblings in a place which had been Hungary. And then after the war ended, the First War, it became Czechoslovakia. So she grew up in a middle-sized town there. Her father died when he was fairly young, so she lived with her mother and her kids in a 2-room house, one of which was an inn. So they really lived in one room. And so they both came to Canada, and they were both strong supporters of Israel, which didn't exist at that time. He was in something called Farband, which was a labor Zionist organization. And my mother was in Pioneer Women, which was also a labor Zionist organization. And my mother was living in Ottawa, and my father was living in Montreal. And it's unlikely that the two would have met, except for the fact that being labor Zionists, they both went to a camp north of Montreal in the Laurentian Mountains called Unser Camp, and that's where they met. They got married in 1939 on Christmas Day and lived in their first apartment. And I came along in 1942. My mother, she didn't have any friends in Montreal. She didn't know anybody, not having lived there. And she hooked up with a couple of Hungarian women, and they had a group of them. So before long, there was about 7 or 8 Hungarian women, and they used to meet about once every 2 weeks at somebody's house and have tea. They would drink tea and eat cookies and chocolates and yak, yak, yak in Hungarian. And I remember being at some of these things. And these ladies were my nénis. Now, néni in Hungarian means auntie. So there was Ilus néni and some other nénis. And the husbands, which I rarely met, were called bácsis. That meant uncle. One of the memories of my mother was how well she spoke English. As a matter of fact, I was so used to her talking English that I thought she had no accent. So I said to one of my friends one day, my mother has no accent. and the friend said to me, you must be kidding, right? Your mother has no accent? She has a thick accent. So then I realized, yeah, she had a thick accent. As a matter of fact, when I was a young kid, maybe a year old, I started speaking. So I spoke with a thick accent because she was the one that I was with most, and I learned to speak with her. So when somebody would say, where did you live? I lived at 3504 Park Avenue. That's how I spoke until I went to school. She had been a legal secretary when she lived in Europe, and when she moved here, she didn't do that because my father owned a business and he worked and she stayed home taking care of us. But she was a mean typist with just 2 fingers. She would type faster than most people could type with all their fingers. So she was good at that. When my dad had to discipline us, if we were bad, he would make fumbling attempts to take off his belt as if to say, I'm going to take this belt off and you're going to get it. He never got it off and he never disciplined us, but his threat was enough to cause us to get better. One more memory of my dad was He became a driver later in life. Now, most young kids today, they pick up driving right away, and it's a natural thing. But my father started driving in his 50s, and he didn't take to driving. My mother took one lesson and she was driving, and my dad just wasn't. So one day we were out driving in the car. We bought a new car because we didn't have one before that. And he stopped at a green light. And we said, "Dad, why do you stop at a green light?" Just then a car whizzed through the red light. We would have been toast. What luck that was. One more thing about his driving. One year we motored across the country from Montreal to Los Angeles to visit my mother's sister Rose and Harry and Morton. And my father, who had never gone over 35 miles in his life, was driving in the car, and he was going 70 miles an hour. And I took my camera out and said, "Dad, they're not going to believe this." And I took a picture of him driving 70 miles an hour. I was the oldest, born in 1942. In 1945, my mother's sister Rella was living with us for a while. She was a younger sister, and she was single. So she was living with us, and my mother, for some reason, she was pregnant with a baby, and she didn't get to the hospital on time. She was home, and the baby started to come. So she and Rella delivered the baby, the two of them, in the house, and then they took a taxi and went to the hospital. So I remember looking through the keyhole of the door, because they closed it, wondering what's going on in there. At 3 years old, you didn't know too much about life or birth. Anyhow, my brother was born there. And then 4 years later, Eitan joined the group. And so we were three musketeers. At that time, we were living in a duplex. So we had 3 bedrooms. So 2 boys had to share a room. And I usually had a room by myself, and my parents had the master bedroom. Life was good with the 3 kids. And then Eitan suddenly got very sick, and nobody knew what was wrong with him. The doctors were looking and they couldn't figure it out. And there was an intern from Israel who came into the room and said, "Oh, this boy has sugar diabetes." And he was right, type 1. And from then on, life in the family changed, because to have a sick, in those days, this is 1952, 53, the art of the science of dealing with the diabetic person was not like it is today. So it was difficult for my parents to take care of him, and difficult for the other kids to have to live in a house where one parent said, "Treat him with kid gloves because he's sick." And the other one said, "No, you have to treat him normally or he'll grow up with problems." And he did. That's what happened. So that was that. Later, we moved to our house on Mountain Sites, where we owned it. And Mark decided to move downstairs. He was 3 years younger than I was. He decided to move downstairs because he had enough sharing bedrooms. Now, downstairs wasn't a really hospitable place. There were no bathrooms down there, no running water. So he slept there, and he did a lot of studying in his day. So he was down there all the time reading and studying and stuff. And he had to go to the bathroom. He had to come upstairs, or he had to eat, or he had to drink. So that was a strange thing, but that's what was happening for quite a few years. When I was a youngster, we lived in an area which was not fully built up like everybody lives today. And so there were some wild areas and places where construction was going on. And me and the friends and the other kids on the street, we used to, after school, go out in the back, and we'd get some big kind of wooden boxes, very, very light wood, and we'd build shacks. And we had a club that lived in the shack. didn't live there, but we had, like, that was our office, and we went in there, and other groups of kids had their own shacks, and we would steal cement from one of the construction sites and be cementing the top of the thing to make it stronger. And so that was one of the fun things that we did. We used to have little bonfires, and it's almost like being out in the wild. One of the things that we did was play hockey all the time. It didn't matter if it was summer, winter, fall, or spring. We played hockey on the street in front of the house. All the kids played outside. There was no such thing as the parents telling the kids or worrying about them, because we were out there playing. It was on the street, and it was a one-way street, so there weren't that many cars, because the end was kind of almost like a cul-de-sac. And so we'd play, and if the car came, we'd move to the side, then we'd play again. So hockey was the game all the time. I remember we had a lot of fun, and we would basically be out there all day. Parents would come out, time for supper. So we'd go in and we'd go out again and play again. And in the summertime in Montreal, the days lasted, the light lasted until 9 o'clock. So we could play outside quite late. What did we do as a family in the evening? This was in the days before television. We used to listen to the radio. The radio then was like TV today. They had programs on the radio. So you used to tune in at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and you'd listen to Mr. and Mrs. North, which was a detective show where the two of them played detectives, or you'd listen to Johnny Dollar, some other shows. So these were shows you used to listen on the radio, and you'd have to close your eyes and try and picture the physical, what's going on. And that's what we had, that's what we did. One day, a family moved into our house, into our block on mountain sites, and they moved in from New York, and they brought with them a television. And we didn't have television in Montreal at this time. This is probably 1950, so I was 8 years old. We all went down to the house to see television. So they turned it on, snow. That's all you got was snow. And we sat there for 15 minutes and watched snow because there was no television. When I went to Northmount High, they opened a school in the ninth year. They had 4 years of high school, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So they opened it, and I was in grade 9. And the school decided they were going to have a football team. So they had tryouts. So I went to try out for the football team. And in grade 9, I was probably 15, I think. Yeah. And it turned out that I was pretty good. I hadn't played, and I was a really good tackler. A lot of the boys, their idea of tackling was to jump onto somebody's shoulders, and he could run another 5 yards before he fell down. I learned to tackle by diving at the fellow's feet, and that's the proper way to tackle. So I made the team, and I played both ways to start with. I played offensive end, and I played linebacker on defense. And I was very proud. I had my helmet and all the pads and stuff. I had never had that before, so that was a good thing. Now, the quarterback of the team, I even remember his name. It was Johnny Gilman. Take off my glasses, don't need them. So the quarterback, Johnny Gilman, was a jock. You know what I mean when I say that? Like, he was a big man on campus. He was and I wasn't. So one day we were having a practice. The practice involved a kicker kicking the ball down the field to a receiver, and he would then try and run the ball back, and two men, me and another one, would go in and try and stop him from getting past us and tackling him. So the first time, the kicker kicked the ball down to him, and it was Johnny Gilman who was running it back. So he started running back, and I said, he's not getting past me. So I tackled him and fractured his leg. This was a good thing for me, but not a good thing for the team. because he sat out 2 games with a fractured leg. And but I taught myself a lesson that, you know, he may be a jock, but the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Me and 3 friends used to get together every Friday night in my friend Mel's basement. And we used to play cards, probably just play cards. Sometimes we'd watch a game if there was on, not usually Friday night. But what we used to do, we used to order pizza. There was a pizzeria about 2 blocks away called Tasty Food. And we used to order 4 all-dressed pizzas for the 4 of us. So the pizzeria had a special. You buy 4 and you pay for 3. So each of these pizzas was about, I don't know what, this big. It was a good serving for 1 person. And it cost $1 for each pizza. But because of the deal, we were paying $3 for 4 big pizzas. Now, today, that would probably cost you $25 or $30. It costs $3. What a bargain. I decided I wanted to go into engineering because that kind of appealed to me. I had that kind of mind. I like to construct things and stuff. Now, I'll tell something that I don't talk about a lot. And that is that when I was in high school, I was really smart, I would say. And I was able to pay attention in class and never study at home. Didn't study, I mean, if you had to do homework or hand something in, I would do it. But I didn't study at all. And I always got A's. So I didn't need to study. I just paid attention in class. I got A's, and that was my school day. So when I graduated high school, there was kind of a special exam called matriculation, and I got a 1st class there. So that was an automatic entry into McGill because you needed a certain minimum standard to get in there. And many of my friends didn't get in there, but I did. Unfortunately, I did the same thing that I did in high school. I didn't study. And I found out later that the instructors only covered part of the material in class, and the rest you had to learn by doing your reading assignments and studying other stuff that wasn't covered. And bottom line is, I failed the year. I did not make the year because I wasn't a good student in studying. I was a good student in listening in class. But when you don't study and you don't look at the material that is not covered in class, you don't know half of the stuff you don't know. So I failed the year and I was very discouraged. And I thought, maybe I'll quit school and go work. And my mother, God bless her, she said, no, you're not. You can't do anything without a college degree. And she was right. So I changed my tune and I studied and I graduated college. I had switched into science. While I was in college, one of my best friends became Bernie Moskowitz. He's somebody that I met in camp. And we became fast friends. We did everything together. I didn't go anywhere without him, and he didn't go anywhere without me. And he was a musician and a great dancer. 2 things which I wasn't. I loved the way he could dance, and I loved the way he could play. I went out and bought myself a banjo. And I have a good musical ear, but I can't read notes. Anyhow, so I learned to play the banjo at an elemental level. And then he and I used to get together and play songs together. And it was mainly folk music. And he was very good. He knew the words, he knew the chords. He taught me some of the progressions, like minor sevenths and so on and so forth. So we built up a repertoire of songs. And then he said to me one day, guess what? I got us a gig. I said, a gig? What are you talking about? He says, yeah. On New Year's Eve, we're going to perform in front of a bunch of high school girls at this club downtown. I said, really? So for the next 3 weeks, we practiced every day getting ready for the gig. And I was nervous as all get out. A blizzard came, closed down the city on the night of the gig, and they canceled it. I was more relieved than disappointed, but we never did that again. We went to different schools, and I didn't know that she existed. She knew my brother, but she didn't know me. One day I was driving with my friend Bernie, and it was a part of Montreal that most Jews lived in. And a car passed by, and I saw some young men that I knew, and one of them said, "Hey, Glouberman, are you coming to the B'nai B'rith meeting tomorrow night?" So I said, yes. And I found out later that Miriam said, "Glouberman, who was that?" So they said, "David Glouberman." She said, "Must be related to Mark. I never knew he had a brother." One of the men called me up a few days later and said, "I want to set you up with a date with Miriam Walder." So I said, "Miriam Walder, where did she go to school?" So he told me, Herzliya. I said, "Oh." So I asked Mark, "Did you know Miriam Walder?" And she says, "Yeah, she's a big fat cow." She had been overweight at one point. So I said, "No fat chicks in my repertoire." So I never called her. A few months later, Bernie and I, again, Bernie with me, we were in one of our favorite coffee shops called the Chez Vito's. And we were sitting there and having some coffee and cigarettes, which everybody did. You could do that in those days, and maybe a piece of cake or pizza, whatever it was. And this girl walked by, and she looked pretty good. And I realized that was Miriam Walder. So I said, "You know what? What are my brother's talking about?" So I called her, I found the number, and I called her up, and I made a date. So I said, "Okay, I'll pick you up with my friend Bernie." So Bernie had a date, and I picked Miriam up, and we went out on a date. And one thing led to another. She and Bernie didn't like each other too much. They had known each other before, and I don't know what it was, but you can't have two best friends. So Miriam became my friend, and Bernie became less my friend until he wasn't my friend anymore. It's kind of sad because he was a good friend. Anyhow, so that's how we started. And then we were off and on for a while. Miriam was a very loving person, and she had planned to go to Israel for a year. And she changed her plans because she didn't want to lose me. She thought if she left me here by myself for a year, when she come back, it would be too late. So she changed her plans and she didn't go. We probably got married about 2 years after we met. We were on again, off again. We broke up once or twice, and then we went back together. And I finally decided this was the girl for me. Because at the beginning I didn't, but I said she's going to be my wife. And you know how I proposed to her? I said, "What kind of a wedding should we have?" I just assumed there was going to be, and from there on, we started planning the wedding. Miriam's father fell in love with me. He just liked me for some reason. And Miriam was very much welcomed into our family. My mother was interested in seeing me settle down. And Miriam was a lovely girl with the right kind of credentials. We had a nice wedding, lots of people. We had about 250 people there. And a good time was had by all. The next week, we boarded my parents' car because we didn't have a car. And they could manage without it. And we drove to the Catskills for a 1-week honeymoon. We were sitting in the Catskill dining room one day, And it was like did you see Dirty Dancing? It was like that. They had families, they had honeymoon couples, and you basically did activities during the day. And in the evening, you had a sit down dinner, and then a comedian or somebody performed. So this was one of those evenings. There was a comedian performing, and it so happened that the waitress that Miriam didn't like for some reason, and Miriam doesn't dislike many people, the waitress was coming by and she tripped and she dropped a tray of food on the floor, making a real crash of a noise. And Miriam started to laugh and she couldn't stop. She kept on laughing and laughing. I said, Miriam, shh, Miriam, shh. As soon as I do that, she started laughing again. It went on for 5 minutes. It was a little bit embarrassing, but this was a thing that we laughed over many, many times. So when we came back from the honeymoon, I moved for the first time into a place not under my parents' roof. I never lived by myself. So we moved into an apartment. She didn't have a mean bone in her body. She was loving. She was considerate. I don't know how many people can say they had their perfect wife. I mean, I didn't have any problems with her. She was just great. What did I love about her? The way she loved me. I mean, she was just open about it. She didn't try to hide anything. She didn't have any tricks or cunning. She was just an open. What you saw was what you got. So she was good. And she already knew how to cook because she'd been cooking for years, and she was a good cook. So I enjoyed that too. I would say that maybe one of the most important things you can do is communicate with your partner. If you don't tell the partner what's going on, something's bothering you, the partner may not know, and that's not a good thing. So you got to communicate. Never go to bed angry. If you're having a fight or a dispute, make sure that you resolve it so in the morning you wake up on good terms. That's very important, communication. When Michael was born, this is the first time I knew something called pure love. I just loved the kid to death. And then about 18 months later, along came Stephen. And when he got old enough, like 2 years old, he wanted to be with Michael and copy Michael, even though Michael was a year ahead of him and made me more capable of doing things. Wait for me, Mungo, he would say, little legs chomping along. And they became good friends. They were always good friends. I remember living in our duplex. We moved from the apartment into a duplex, and we were on the second floor, and the landlord lived downstairs. It was new. We moved in. It had never been lived in before. And Michael and Stephen were in the same room. And we had on the floor linoleum flooring, not carpets. And they'd get up early in the morning like kids did, and they had some blocks. And they used to love building things with blocks and then knocking them over. Crash! And they used to do this for several months. And then one day we had a knock on the door. And who was it? It was the teenage daughter of the family living downstairs. And her room was right underneath their bedroom. She asked us if we could please have them stop doing that at 5 o'clock in the morning because we used to wake her up all the time. So sorry. And we put carpets in the room. And we stopped them from doing that as much as we could. And then a couple of years later, along came Judah. So we had 3 boys. We used to take trips to Philadelphia. Miriam's sister, Ellie, had married Aaron when she was down in the Poconos on a vacation, and she met him there, and he fell in love with her, and he came up to Montreal and met the family, and then she married him and moved to Philadelphia. So we used to take trips, all three of us, down to Philadelphia, and then from there on to Atlantic City to enjoy the seaside and the ocean. And this is something we really look forward to. It was a long trip, like 7-8 hours driving in the car to get there. But this is some of the things, one of the things that we enjoyed very much was driving down there and spending time with them. And this is where we learned to play pinochle, the older ones, of course. And the kids used to love going on the boardwalk, and they had an amusement park there. We went on the beach and into the ocean. So that was one of the things that we liked very much. Your kids are smarter than you think. When our kids were growing up, we pretty much thought we knew what was going on and we were on top of it, but they did a lot of stuff that we didn't know about. And not that it was really bad, but we would perhaps not have liked to hear the things they were doing. But anyways, fortunately, we had good kids. And so we didn't have to be on top of them all the time. They knew what was not right, and they usually stuck to it. There's that one story. Miriam and I were on vacation, and Miriam's friend Sherry was babysitting, but she had to work. So she was at work, and she'd come home and watch the kids at night. Now at the time, Michael was 11 and Stephen was 9 or 9.5. Judah was 5, I guess. So Michael could kind of be okay during the day, but at night he needed an adult there. So they were playing in our fireplace with matches and newspaper. It was really fun to take a big piece of sheet of newspaper, light it up, watch it flare up, and float up the chimney. So they were doing this, and somebody rang the bell. So one of them went to open the door, and there was Patrick, Michael's friend. Do you know your roof is on fire? I said, what? So they ran out, and Michael, maybe Stephen too, they grabbed a garden hose, climbed up on the roof, and put the fire out. It hadn't gotten very bad, but the roof was covered with something called shake, and this stuff very easily caught fire. We replaced it after that, but they put the fire out. Then they called Sherry at work, told you what happened, and she called the fire department, and they came to the house. And when they got up on there, they said, "Oh, okay, it's all out. There's nothing to do." And when we came home, we had to think about what kind of a punishment would this be worth. I can't remember what we punished them with. Usually the punishment was, "You're grounded," but I don't remember what we did. But we were tolerant parents, and we understood that kids play games. And this wasn't a malicious thing that they did. They were just having some fun. So usually the kids were good. They got into very little trouble. In 1967, Montreal decided before 67, but it took place in 67. We had a World's Fair called Expo 67. Now that was a good name because it was both English and French with the same spelling, Expo 67. And they had spent 2 years building up an island in the St. Lawrence River to host the World's Fair. And they also dug a subway, our first subway, and all the landfill from the subway went to the island to build up the land. So this was a major, major World's Fair with all the most of the countries of the world, the major ones like Britain and France and China and the Soviet Union, having what they called pavilions or buildings with their themes in there. And you'd go in there with something called a visa, and they would stamp it like you're going into a country. So that was built up there, and it was wonderful. It put Montreal on the map. And it was done by the French-Canadian people there. Shortly afterwards, President Charles de Gaulle came to visit Canada and came to Quebec, and he uttered those feared words, Vive le Québec libre, which means long live free Quebec. And this started a political movement by a new party called the Parti Québécois, which means the Quebec Party for separation. They wanted to separate from Canada, just like America had a civil war about that many years earlier. This went on to the point that I had it up to here. I couldn't watch TV or listen to the radio because all you heard in the English press was how we were being oppressed, and they were taking away this right and that right, and you couldn't do this anymore and you couldn't do that anymore, only in French. And I thought, well, this is really not where I want my kids to grow up. Miriam's father, Label, he was making, I think, men's clothing and selling them to various stores. And one day, one of his major clients went bankrupt. So he went bankrupt. Now, he was an honorable man. Now, if you go bankrupt, that means that you don't pay your creditors. He felt that wasn't right. He wanted to pay the people he owed money. So he went and got himself a job as a cutter for crappy payment, crappy wages. And he took a job on Saturday as a custom peddler to earn more money so he could help pay off the people that he owed money to. He did this on Shabbos, even though he was an Orthodox Jew who never smoked on Shabbos and didn't drive on Shabbos. Well, he didn't drive, but he didn't ride in a bus. But this was more important. One of his great joys was on Sunday mornings, didn't have a car. On Sunday mornings, I would drive out to pick him up in my car, and we drive by the bakery and pick up bagels and lox, and he'd come over to Miriam and my house, and we had brunch, and all the kids were there, and this was the major moment in his week where he had a good time. Sat there with us, talking to the kids. You know, this was very important to him, and I was very happy to be able to help him out with it. Label lived in Montreal near us, and she would never have left. He wasn't going to come with us. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I would say unfortunately, he died while living in our house. Like, he was sick, and we moved into our house, and he died of pancreatic cancer. So after that, she was more prepared to travel. In 1975, we moved here in 78. In 1975, I arranged for a business trip with my company to come down to California for a week. And it was a course. So I left on a Sunday night in a blizzard. It was snowing to beat the band. Plane took off, landed in LA. Maybe I left Sunday morning. It landed in LA, and it was 80 degrees and sunny and warm. And I spent the week at a Holiday Inn hotel downtown, about a block or two from the convention center where this course was being held. And the course was a joke. I mean, it was just really an excuse to have a good time. So I went on the course, paid attention, and then that night I would go out to eat or whatever it was. And by the time the week ended, Friday night, most people went back. I went up to Morton's house. He was already living in his house on the hill, and I went swimming, and this is great. When I left on Sunday morning to go back to Montreal, I landed in another blizzard. So I had it in my mind, that's where I want to go. It took a long time to get a green card from America. But because Ellie was an American citizen, well, this basically cut it down to 8 months instead of taking 3 or 4 years. So we got the green cards, and I didn't wait too long after that to decide, okay, we're leaving. We flew in the plane, and when we landed in LA, we were met by the 3 families who were already living here, Morton and Bracha, and Mark and Debbie, and Sharon and Jonathan. Their families were all here already. And they met us at the airport, and we all drove up to Morton's house, and we stayed there for a week. We wanted to move into an apartment, but we couldn't do it until we established our credit. So that took a week. Once that happened, we went and we rented an apartment around the corner from where the kids were going to go to school. That was very convenient because both Miriam and and Miriam got a job right away at Cedars as a nurse, and she only worked there her whole career. And it took me a week to get a job with what's called a service bureau. They don't have those anymore, here in the San Fernando Valley. And then the kids started school and we started to work. When I was in Canada, I started working for a company called the Sun Life of Canada. There wasn't a lot of computers. There weren't a lot of computers around in those days. For the first 3 months, I concentrated on these, and we had a computer there, and I learned how to program in assembly language, which is very, very basic. Today, nobody does that. And then I stayed there for about 14 months until I had enough of the place. I will say one thing, they didn't pay you a lot salary-wise, but they offered free full course meals every lunchtime. And in the 14 months I worked there, I gained 30 pounds. So that was one of the side benefits or non-benefits of working there. But I decided I wanted to change, and I went to work at Honeywell. I'd work on some sales promotions. I'd work on some things that we call benchmarks, which you take your computer and tell the prospective clients that your computer could do this faster than somebody else. So then they said, okay, let's see you do it, we'll time it. So I was working on stuff like that, and doing a lot of pre-sales work. When the group of people, the teams did well, they would award them something. So I was on one of the award-winning teams, and they awarded us a trip to Bermuda. All expenses paid, but no family, just the employees. So this happened after I had a medical situation where I had to have a lung removed. And that was a shocker in its own right, but I thought it was cancer. It wasn't cancer. The lung was taken out, and I was fine after that. But when I got out of the hospital, I had lost about 25 pounds. And the next week was scheduled for this vacation in Bermuda. So I decided I was in good enough shape to go. So I did. And this is the second year. The year before, I had also gone and won an award and also went to Bermuda. So Miriam had to stay home and take care of the kids. So equal being equal, she said, okay, now it's my turn. Now Miriam was always a women's libber. Remember that. Miriam was a women's libber. So she said, now you're going to stay home. And Ira and I, that was her best friend, we were going on our own vacation. So they went to Jamaica. And I had to stay home with the 3 kids. And believe you me, it was no picnic, but she deserved it. So she had a good time, and she came home and she told me stories after which made my hair turn gray. 2 women out on a town like that. when I arrived in America, I already had 7 or 8 years of experience programming. And in fact, I was a district support manager at the time. So I was already managing a team of 10 programmers. So I had management experience and programming experience. And so I started working at the Service Bureau. And my first major assignment was payrolls. We developed the first online payroll systems. And we were competing with large companies. One large one, ADP, which is still there today, the big payroll computer company. So they had big batch systems. We offered online systems, which meant that the users could enter the hours for their people and get the checks the next day. And ADP couldn't do anything like that. So we were very successful at that. I had quite a few hobbies. I am a numismatist, which means collecting coins and paper money. So I kind of toned down on that, but there was a time doing this in Canada and then moving here where I used to buy mint sets from the Canadian Mint and the US Mint and save them up. So I still have all these things, and one day somebody's going to inherit them. So I have collection from all over the world, and I actually bought, I think, 50 pounds of coins at one time. You don't get anything really good when you're buying 50 pounds of coins, but it gives you a lot of variety of cheap coins. So I still have those, and I catalog them and put them away. So I do have that. I was a reader of science fiction stories. I still have a bunch of science fiction books that go back to the 60s. They were paperbacks, so there's no first editions, but I used to love reading science fiction, and I still do on occasion. Okay, so as you're aware, I'm fond of games and puzzles. Going back, way back, games and puzzles, I used to like to offer my kids and later on my grandkids puzzles. What is this and what is that? And everybody had fun with it. Matter of fact, we just did one the other day with knights and knaves. Were you there? Knights and knaves, fun. That was another hobby. Another hobby I had was electric trains. Now you don't remember that because this was back in Canada. I didn't do that here, but we had an unfinished room in the basement of our last house, and I set up a complicated set of track where I could run 2 or 3 trains at once. And I spent a lot of time down there doing that. That was a fun hobby of mine. Another thing that I did, I think I hinted on that before, it was folk music, playing guitar and banjo with Bernie. So that was another one of my hobbies. And finally, a hobby that another 2 hobbies that I like to do. One of them was not so much, just more like the fun and games thing, was playing pinochle with the family. We used to play pinochle. And Stephen in particular was a threat. He was really good at it, much better than us. And the other thing was Miriam loved to gamble. She learned this from her mother and their family, and she used to love to go to Las Vegas and play cards. And we'd meet Ellie there and Aaron, and Ellie also would love to go there and play cards. The first one was when Michael had a brain tumor when he was about 15 or 16, 15. And this was something that I could not deal with. I just kind of pretended, no, it's not there, and it was there. And fortunately, we found good doctors. Miriam, who was working at Cedars, found some good doctors. They were at UCLA, but nonetheless, they really took care of Michael. And to this day, it's just a distant bad memory. The other thing was when Steve got sick. Now, as you know, I'm not really a God-fearing man. And one of the difficulties in that is that when you really need to ask for help for something, you can't ask God. I couldn't ask God. So I have to find some other ways of praying or whatever I substituted for praying to try and help Stephen out. The poor man just, I don't want to go into this too deeply, but he just took the wrong turn on every fork in the road. Whatever happened, it was the wrong one. It was the wrong, and in his last days, I would just lie there and cry. I just didn't know what to do. It was so difficult, Leah, so difficult. And I remember going to his funeral out in Simi Valley. They packed the room where the service was. And I think the schools closed down and everybody came. And there were so many people there to remember him, to commemorate his passing. I was moved to think that so many people cared for him like that. That was something that to this day, I just feel bad about. So, brings a tear to my eye. I was proud of all my kids. They made successes of their lives up to now. Michael is doing very well in his field. He's well known and regarded. Stephen was one of the top lawyers. He basically probably was really, really exceptionally good. And Judah, though he had some problems getting there, is now a valued employee where he's doing a work for Brian. So I'm exceedingly proud of those three. And the three women that they married, all beautiful wives. And I'm happy that me and Miriam are leaving behind good families. Them, kids, and the grandkids, just 9 wonderful kids. Very, very proud of you. I grew up in a family, my mother and father, who I don't know if they ever loved each other. I mean, they got married, they had kids, they lived a life together. There wasn't a lot of love in that family. And this is something that, this is what I knew. You know, I grew up there, that's what I knew. And I would say to myself, learn to love sooner. Learn more about love. And practice love. To me, it came very late. I learned it from Miriam. I didn't know it before. So I wasted many years not really knowing about love. So that's my advice to you, young David. Love.